Anant Agarwal of MIT, or I should say edX, has come up with an acronym, which I guess is based to some degree on what I'm doing now, which he calls KSV, which is very flatteringly refers to Khan style videos. And he graciously asked me if I could do a KSV, a Khan style video on making KSVs. So I will make my best attempt at this very meta level task. So, and this is just my guess of why KSVs may resonate with people. And the first one is that they're just conversational. Conversational. So if you were to make a video, or if you want to make a video like this, I encourage you to talk in the videos the way that you would talk to another human being, the way you would actually have a conversation with another human being, maybe in a tone not too different than I'm speaking right now. If you were in the room with me, I would be talking to you just like this, as strange as that might seem. Now, what is not conversational? Well, there's a couple of non-conversational styles. The least conversational style, and unfortunately this is the style that we see the most in education materials, is what I would call the highly scripted, highly polished, but emotionless style. So this is not, so let me write this down this way. So not emotionless. And if you want an example of emotionless, go on YouTube and do a search for some concept, I don't know, in chemistry or biology, photosynthesis or something. And you'll find these videos that are very polished, and they'll maybe have some computer graphics with mitochondria in them and all things like that. And then they'll have some type of a voiceover during those videos that sound not too different than your GPS device. It'll sound, the next step in mitochondria is when the ATP gets a new, and even though it sounds very professional, it actually is not what human beings, or at least in my opinion, what human beings want to hear. They don't relate to it. That clearly does not sound like another human being. You'll see in a lot of education videos where it's clear that someone wrote a script and that they're paying someone, or they hired someone else to read the script, or maybe they're reading their own script, but it just doesn't come off like that person is thinking. Human beings, as listeners, are highly, highly, highly sensitive to what is going on in the speaker's brain. If the speaker's brain is not thinking in real time, if they're just reading something, then your cue is, well, why should I be thinking it through, or why should I care? If the speaker is emotionless, doesn't really care about what they're talking about, there's no intonation in their voice, then it's a big cue, especially if it's dense material, it's a big cue for the user not to care too much about it. Now, the other, I guess I would categorize as nots to do, or at least that I try not to do, is talking above the student. Talking above the student. Be respectful of the student, but don't talk above them. And I think most of us recognize what talking above is. This is, okay, the next step is going to be really easy. Okay, well, we can skip those steps, and then we can do that. And then if obviously this is intuitively obvious, so we can move on to the next. That's usually talking above. And I think most people recognize that that's not always the most helpful thing. Now, what's not obvious is oftentimes when someone is talking above, and you say, hey, look, just slow down a little bit. Not everyone's an expert. They go into the other mode, which might be just as bad or worse, which is talking below. Talking below the student. And this is where it gets really, really, it almost gets condescending, where it's, the next, so let's do an algebra problem. The next step, and you talk to the user like they're a 6-year-old, and one thing that I found is not even 6-year-olds like to be talked to like they're 6-year-olds. They want to be engaged with, where you respect them, you respect their ability to understand things, but you also respect that they're new to the topic and you're willing to essentially work through things. Now, the next big point, and I'll use an appropriate color for this, which is very important on a meta level, is to use colors and visuals. So I'll write visuals first. Visuals and colors, with the one caveat that it doesn't have to be too fancy. Not too fancy. And not too fancy, there's two implications for not too fancy. I actually think, my personal opinion is hand-drawn. I don't know if there's a hyphen there. I'll write it with a hyphen. I personally believe that when someone sees something hand-drawn, it actually resonates with their brain better. They can process it better. They can see it written out. And if they just see it in a PowerPoint or they just see something pop up, it doesn't quite connect with their brain in exactly the same way. The other thing is you get higher output, more output. More output. If I took the time to make computer graphics for this little thing that I'm making here, and it's not ideal, I'm obviously overloading the use of this yellow and all the rest, but it would have taken a lot more time. And if I'd written the script and all these computer graphics, it would have taken a lot more time, and it's not clear to me that it would have been that much more impactful. So, conversational, visuals, and colors. Now, and I'm a big fan of diagramming. I don't know exactly whether I have something to diagram just at this moment, but if I did, I would enjoy diagramming it. The next idea is the idea around preparation. Around preparation. And here, the preparation I'd advocate, or at least what works for me, is very different than what sometimes is associated with preparation. For me, it's very important to prepare your mind. Prepare your mind. But once you prepare your mind, this is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, preparing your mind, you might spend a lifetime preparing your mind in order to be able to teach something. But prepare your mind, make sure it's very distilled in your mind, that you have clear visuals in your brain of how this concept can be depicted. I often go on hour-long walks to think about what's the best way to visualize one concept or another. But once you prepare your mind, speak directly from it. Speak from mind, and if possible, your heart as well, not to get a little bit too touchy-feely. The thing not to do, and this goes back to the knots right over here, is the emotionalist. I know it does work for some folks, but I'm personally not a fan of scripts. So let me write this way. So no scripts. Scripts are okay. Actually, oftentimes the process of writing a script or writing an outline could prepare your mind, at which point I would encourage you to speak from your mind or your heart. And you often overthink things. You often say, oh, I said once, or I mumbled a little bit. But people actually don't mind that, as long as they can tell it's coming from you, and as long as you're able to articulate it eventually in a fairly clean way. Scripts, also, I've seen people who can read a script in a very believable way. I think they are good at letting their brain re-engage with the concept. So, there's a famous quote. I actually forget who it's by. I have a feeling it was Mark Twain or Benjamin Franklin or one of those characters who say, famously, a lecture is a transferring from the professor's notes to the student's notes without going through the brains of either of them. And that's essentially what a script is doing. A good script reader, if you've got to read scripts, will read the script but actually process it in their brain. So they'll process it in their brain right there. And when they process in their brain, what comes out of their mouth is something that a student's brain will actually want to process and actually want to listen to. Now, the last point I'll make, and this was something that was initially forced onto me. This was initially forced onto me by YouTube. I don't want to make the YouTube logo, but it's the idea of length. It's the idea of try to be as short as possible, but not too short. I've found that most concepts can be articulated reasonably well in about 10 minutes. If 10 minutes is not enough time, so if you feel like you need 60 minutes to articulate a concept, you should be able to chunk that down into 10 or 6 minute or 8 minute chunks. And what the value of that is, well, there's several values there. One is a content producer, especially if you're speaking from your mind, you're much less likely to make a careless mistake in 10 minutes than you are in 60 minutes. But it also becomes much easier for the student to navigate. Maybe the student is only having trouble right over here with Fourier transforms and doesn't have to listen to this part over here, and so they can just immediately move in to that part of it. It's also good. It's like a good action novel, one of those Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code type novels where you feel like, oh, I can read the next chapter. The next chapter is 3 minutes or 3 pages. But by doing that, you reach a milestone and say, oh, I'll read another one. And so you're, to a large degree, the person's mind, since they're able to rest, is maybe more likely to stay engaged over a longer period of time. And there's actually a whole bunch of research to this effect that students actually have trouble in one stretch, especially with really deep, engaging or deep, dense content. They have trouble paying attention for more than 10 minutes. So not to be a hypocrite, I realize that I'm at 9 minutes and 44, so I will leave you there.